This call is being recorded.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another DIGIMENTORS briefing. We're delighted to have you join us as we have a very important conversation about Giving Tuesday, the global giving opportunity that's taken the world by storm. Today, we have a very special expert who's going to help us. Jamie McDonald is a social sector entrepreneur and the founder of Generosity Incorporated. Jamie advises socially motivated business executives and visionaries driving large-scale change, and she works with the Belfer Center for Innovation and Social Impact at the 92nd Street Y as part of the Giving Tuesday team, where she supports nearly 100 community leaders of local campaigns. She joined the Giving Tuesday team after leading 3 large Giving Tuesday campaigns that collectively raised $20 million, including the Baltimore Gives campaign in 2013. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Sree.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're delighted that you would spend some time with us and help us understand what is the opportunity with Giving Tuesday and where it's going. Of course, by now everybody knows what it is, but I'd love to hear your story with Giving Tuesday, and then we'll get into some very practical things as well.
Sure. First, thanks so much for giving me a chance to talk about Giving Tuesday. It's one of my favorite topics. It's just an amazing thing to have been involved in, and I, like many of the people that are likely part of your community, Sree, when I got involved with Giving Tuesday, at the time I had a company called GiveCore, and we were focused on bringing communities together around social good. And in 2012, the first year of Giving Tuesday, just through the Giving Tuesday social media channels, I heard about it. And, and it was an idea born out of a collaboration that year between Henry Timms at the 92nd Street Y and the UN Foundation. And with very little kind of marketing muscle behind it, they put this idea out into the world that on the heels of Black Friday and Cyber Monday, they wanted to reclaim the giving season. And I saw this, out just in the social channels, and it really resonated with me. And so with my little company that at that point was about 6 months old, we shared this vision with our community of Giving Tuesday, and we were overwhelmed by the response. So I recognized that there was something to this, and obviously at the same time, the team at the 92nd Street Y recognized that there was something to it, because I was one of many people that really felt the power of the vision of Giving Tuesday. And in the second year, in 2013, on the heels of that kind of experience in year one, I pulled together a coalition of folks across Baltimore, which is my hometown, and said, look, here's this idea, that we want to reclaim the giving season after Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And what if we tried to do something really big? If we tried to raise $5 million in a day and become the most generous city in America on Giving Tuesday. And I pulled together groups like the United Way and the Associated, which is our Jewish Federation, and our school system, and a bunch of the sort of really visible nonprofits, and kind of sat everybody in a room and said, do we think we can lock arms and try to do this? And we all kind of had to swallow hard, with butterflies in our stomachs, but we said, let's do it. And we thought that we had one little bit of it in the bag, because we weren't sure there were going to be any other cities that tried to do Giving Tuesday campaigns that year. But we not only met our goal, we actually raised almost $6 million that year. But like the Giving Tuesday movement as a whole, we also really emphasized things that were non-monetary. So we had huge numbers of volunteer activations. We had the giant social media advocacy online. We even had one of our favorite stories from the year is we had an elderly woman on a fixed income who couldn't give any dollars, but she called us up and said, I want to be part of the campaign. I've got an old piano, that I'd love to donate to a children's music organization. And we connected her with a children's music organization. And then from there, I've been involved every year since, leading 2 statewide campaigns with a coalition of folks in Maryland. And then when I sold my company to Network for Good in 2014, I actually joined the Giving Tuesday team to work with people that were doing exactly what I did, leading coalition campaigns across communities. And so now I work with 100 plus community leaders across the country who are doing those kind of big, either town-wide, city-wide, or statewide coalitions. And in 2018, we'll probably have about 120 of those across the U.S.
Wow, that's amazing what you've been able to do. I think it's worth noting for all of us that 92nd Street Y and the UNICEF Foundation gave this into the world without putting their stamp on it and their brand on it.
That's right.
And that's why you and others, and thousands and millions of others, felt ownership of it. And those who haven't had a chance to see Henry Timms' book, you mentioned him at Henry Timms on Twitter. He and Jeremy Hyman's have written a book called New Power about how nonprofits and others should think about building a movement, not just building a charity. And it's a great way of thinking about the lessons from Giving Tuesday, which, as we know, most nonprofits want to hold on to everything and get all the credit. And the generosity of that was what really helped it go around the world.
Well, and I think, it's an astute observation, Sree, because I do think that one of the things that is, I think is a misunderstanding in today's world is the power of unbranding. There's so much emphasis on branding, and I think we misunderstand in many instances what the value of branding is, because Giving Tuesday's name is no less powerful because we let people riff on the logo and riff on the ways that they use the name. In any more than Google's logo is less powerful because they have all the different ways that they sort of riff on the logo all year round. The ways that you connect people into your brand and let them feel that sort of very authentic connection is something that I think a lot of brands really misunderstand, and that we've certainly felt in Giving Tuesday, not just in the U.S., but around the world, where if you search Giving Tuesday logos online or global Giving Tuesday logos, you'll see, 55 different variations of the Giving Tuesday heart, each of which has colors or a pattern that reflects that country's take on generosity, or that sort of country's sort of color palette or identity in some way. And it's such a beautiful reflection of the power of the brand.
That's a great lesson for everybody. And I know there will be, marketing departments that would see those logos and the hair on the back of their necks would be standing up because they would be so upset that this is happening. So let's get to some practical advice and some tips. And maybe the way to get into that is maybe if you have some stats about where we are today. You were there in the early days, 2012. Sure. Here we are 6 years later. What does the math look like?
So the math is it's incredible. It's sort of beyond the dream startup hockey stick, as they say. It's so this past year we had in 2017 activity in more than 150 countries and territories around the world. We think that by reach we can say that we are the largest social movement in the world in terms of geographic dispersal of our work. We have this year we'll have 54, 55 official country campaigns, and what those are their campaigns that are sanctioned by Giving Tuesday, and they receive support from us, and in turn they provide us with information and stories and kind of experimentation that helps us to grow giving and generosity around the world. In the U.S., as I mentioned a moment ago, we'll probably have 120 or so community coalition campaigns. We'll have activity in every state in the country, from the tiniest towns to, giant cities and states. We have, last year in the U.S., just online, more than $300 million was raised on Giving Tuesday, and we know that that's just a fraction of the dollars that were raised in the U.S. because we don't really have a way to account for offline giving, for the value of giving in kind, the value of volunteer hours that are donated on Giving Tuesday and other forms of giving. And then when you sort of expand that out to around the globe, it's really it's really hard for us to even estimate, the generosity that actually happens on Giving Tuesday. One other important, I guess, two other stats I'd give you for, folks that may be wondering about kind of how Giving Tuesday connects into year-end giving, since it's in the U.S. at least, it's such an important time of year for nonprofits. So, one of the important bits of research that's been done the last few years by quite a few of the online giving platforms that are our partners, and this is not research sanctioned by us, this is their own research, is that platforms have done sort of a look back from the start of Giving Tuesday in 2012 forward into, at this point we don't have the 2018 data obviously, but through 2017, and have shown that nonprofits that participate in Giving Tuesday as a component of their year-end fundraising raise 14 times more than nonprofits that don't participate in Giving Tuesday and just do December fundraising. Network for Good has a great chart that really shows that well. And we don't think that that's because, Giving Tuesday is sort of this magical day, but we think that nonprofits that really see Giving Tuesday as the beginning of an arc of engagement from Giving Tuesday through December 31st, have that whole period of time to tell stories, to engage their audience, to speak to different kinds of supporters, from Giving Tuesday, which tends to really attract young and digital givers, through year-end, where much more traditional campaigns can make sense for a lot of nonprofits. And so nonprofits that treat it that way have far better Decembers than nonprofits that choose just to do your sort of traditional December 30th, December 31st kind of year-end appeals. And then the final kind of bit of information that I would leave your folks with is that Giving Tuesday is Giving Tuesday. It's not Fundraising Tuesday. So while we're talking about data, one of the things that our team is incredibly focused on all the time is that our role, as we see it in the movement, is to inspire people to be generous in whatever way makes sense for them. And so if that's dollars, that's great. And we hope that, we're making it easier for nonprofits to reach people because we're raising the awareness for Giving Tuesday. But we are really about giving in all forms, from, dollars to skills to their voice to random acts of kindness. And all of that for us is equally powerful and equally important. And so we really, we encourage nonprofits to think about all the different ways that they can engage audiences beyond just the dollars. And what's exciting is we see a lot of that happening on Giving Tuesday.
That's fabulous. Let's get folks ready for some questions. If you have questions, you would just kind of unmute your phone and we'd come to you. But in the meantime, what are your top things that you tell folks who are, nonprofits, small, medium, large? Is there a difference of what you tell them to do, or you would advise them to do?
Well, I think there's certainly a difference in the sense that, small nonprofits have often different resources at their disposal from large nonprofits, but I think everybody can participate in Giving Tuesday and be effective. If it's useful to your audience, I could certainly share some case studies or some examples of sort of large and small activations that we see. But I would say that there are kind of four overarching things that are true of all effective campaigns across the board. One is that you have a passionate leader. I mean, the Giving Tuesday is a joyous, fun celebration of giving. This is not a day of obligation. This is a day of opportunity to matter in your community. And we find that, young, digitally oriented Giving Tuesday leaders are often the most effective, because they understand sort of the language of digital engagement. And since Giving Tuesday has really become a gateway for young givers sort of in their giving year, in the way that December 31st has been for traditional givers, older givers, people who think in that language are very, very powerful on Giving Tuesday. But whoever that leader is, it's they've got to be thinking very creatively about ways to break through in what is a high volume day on the calendar, which on the plus side means donors are thinking about who to support and you want to be in that conversation, but it also means that you've got to be creative and inspiring in the way that you reach out. The second thing is the ability to tell a compelling story and to plan out that storytelling so that I call it an iconic story. So I think that nonprofits have to think more in the frame of a consumer marketing approach, which is, if you think about pumpkin spice latte month at Starbucks, they're not making every commercial about pumpkin spice lattes because they don't want you to come in and get your caramel macchiato. They're using pumpkin spice latte because they know that the repetition of that single message will break through and you'll come into Starbucks because they're top of mind for whatever it is you enjoy when you go there. Well, nonprofits tend to want to tell us 30 stories about all the different people they serve, or worse yet, they want to just tell us lots of data. And in fact, what we find is that finding a single iconic story that you really build your campaign around from one human being's point of view who you've impacted is far more effective, because just when you're tired of hearing the story because it's out there 20 some times or 30 or 50 is just when it's breaking through to people for the first time. So that's a second really key thing. The third is collaborations. We really find that Giving Tuesday is a powerful day to find ambassadors who want to support your nonprofit, to find retailers or merchant partners that you could tie in with Small Business Saturday and see if you can support one another's efforts. So the nonprofit can talk about how excited they are to support, Sam's Pizza Shop, small business on Small Business Saturday, and Sam's Pizza Shop can talk about how excited they are to be supporting, the local nonprofit that they support. And that those kind of collaborations really are effective on Giving Tuesday. And then the final thing, and I save it for last, but really of those top four things, it's probably the most important thing, is whatever you do, be authentic. We are all so inundated with so much marketing now that I think our radar for authenticity is very fine-tuned, and people want to hear authentic stories. They want to hear what works and what doesn't work. They want you to own the opportunity, but also own the learning that still needs to happen. And I think that kind of authenticity in both your language and your visuals really can break through on a day like Giving Tuesday.
This is great information. Thank you so much. I want to see if anyone has a question here. I have some follow-ups as well, of course, but I want to see if somebody would like to ask a question. Just before we get to that, I want to ask you, can you think of organizations that make mistakes that they could easily fix, especially with 2 weeks out? Some people may be worried that they can't do as much as they'd like to with coming up so quickly.
Yeah, so we have a whole plan for procrastinators that I'm happy to provide you with a link with, Sree, so that you can send that out to your audience afterwards. But
yes,
I
please.
think that with just a couple of weeks to go, the mistakes that people can make is thinking that, you send out one email the morning of Giving Tuesday and somehow you're going to have this magical response of people who are going to say, oh, it's Giving Tuesday and I've just heard from you one time and I haven't heard from you in a year and, I'm going to give to you today. I think you have to treat it, even with just a couple of weeks to go, with a bit of planning. So we recommend at a minimum 3 to 4 emails around that iconic story, with an emphasis on how the donor can, or how the supporter can matter. And, so there's something when I do these trainings that I often say, is that, and hang with me through this metaphor, but people don't want to drill, they want a hole, right? So if you think about that, people don't go to Home Depot because they want to buy a drill. They go to Home Depot because they need a hole in the wall. And giving is the same way. People don't give because they want to give. They give because they want to matter in somebody's life. And so the twist of the messaging that matters so much if you want to break through with people is not just what you do, that's the drill, right? But the impact that it's going to have on somebody's life and how they personally can matter in making that change, that's the whole. And that is the message that is really important. If you've only got a little bit of time left and you're going to send 3 or 4 emails, then the sort of the focus of the email is hooking them with the iconic story and then telling them how they can matter. The second thing is I would have a plan ahead of time for what you're going to do on the day of Giving Tuesday. So having a goal is a really helpful frame for a campaign, whether your goal is dollars or whether your goal is number of donors or number of new donors. Having some kind of goal that you state publicly both creates a sense of energy and excitement, that you're going to try to achieve something on Giving Tuesday. It also gives you a reason to continue to communicate with people on Giving Tuesday itself. If you don't have a goal, then just continually going out, all you have to talk about is the ask. But if you have a goal, then you can say, we're 25% of the way to our goal. Thank you so much to the people who've already given. Who else can help us? So it creates a frame around which you can really sort of continue to message and tell your story and talk to people on Giving Tuesday. And then the final thing that I recommend is have a plan for what happens after Giving Tuesday, because I think it's really important for nonprofits to recognize that the gift is the beginning of the relationship. It's not the end of a process. It's the beginning of a person who you now have the responsibility and the opportunity to inspire, engage, thank, and celebrate so that they stay with you. Because most of your audience will know this, but about 80% of the people who give to a nonprofit for the first time never give again. And the reason
80%,
is that so many, 80%.
Wow.
And so people put so much energy into getting that donor the first time, but they don't put any energy into how they keep that donor happy and inspired. And so I really like to recommend that the third part of your planning for Giving Tuesday, even if you only had a small number of donors, imagine if you kept every single one of those donors and they stay with you for a long time because you invest in what happens after the gift. That's a really powerful way to use a day like Giving Tuesday, even if it's not, a blowout, thousands of new donors or hundreds of new donors. If you could keep every one of those people that gives, no matter how many it was, that is a powerful impact on your organization.
It absolutely is, and it's a great way to think about this. Let's see if anyone has a question they'd like to ask. You can just unmute yourself and ask a question. Otherwise, we have just a few minutes left. In terms of going from that Giving Tuesday message into the year-end campaign, how do you do that elegantly without, you've just hit up people for, say, as you said, you have a before, during, and after plan for Giving Tuesday. Should you wait, or should you just launch into your next thing, or do you reference back? What do you do?
Well, so, in a perfect world, there would be a continuum, or again, an arc of activity from Giving Tuesday to year-end. I'll give you a beautiful case study that I love, that I think did this particularly well. There was a school in Baltimore that was, it's a city school, and like many urban schools, lost its funding for arts and music programs, and they had a math teacher who was a musician and really wanted to bring a music program into their school. So they built their Giving Tuesday campaign around raising the money for 30 instruments so that the school could launch a band. And they, so they did a great campaign on Giving Tuesday, and it was obviously very tangible. Just like I said, people really understood how they could matter. They had a focal point. In this case, it was of a teacher. It wasn't of a student, but a teacher telling the story of what music had meant to him. And they raised the money on Giving Tuesday for those musical instruments. And then beginning on Giving Tuesday, they started to show kind of what happened. So they showed the kids going to Guitar Center and with the teacher, picking out the instruments and learning, what a woodwind was and, what a string instrument was. And then they showed them 3 or 4 sessions into their, their music instruction, squeaking through, the first Noel or something like that, some holiday song, and then on in their year-end ask, they talked about, well, now we've got the instruments for the band, but there's a whole series of other things that we'd like to be able to do. We want to be able to get music sheets. We need a place that we can, practice in a good room. We need great chairs. So they built on the campaign through year end. And then about the 15th or 20th of January, they sent to all the people who gave in both the Giving Tuesday campaign and the year-end campaign a video of all of the kids playing a song, a god-awful rendition of some song, because none of them knew how to really play yet. But it was such a touching and real way to help people understand that, they made this happen. And it carried all the way through, and they found actually that quite a few of their donors on Giving Tuesday gave again at year-end because they were so inspired by the communication.
Right. And that works. Right.
Yeah.
That's great. So we're almost out of time. If anybody would like to ask a question, please let us know. Otherwise, I want to make sure that Jamie has our deep gratitude for joining us and sharing her ideas. Jamie, if you wouldn't mind emailing me anything that you think people should know. It might be stuff that's already on your website, but sometimes getting it directly from us will help, and I will share it with them. And where should people, any advice for that day itself in terms of keeping up the energy, and any thoughts along those lines?
So I'll in one of the documents I'll send you, we'll kind of talk about planning that day, but we hear from a lot of people in nonprofits around the country that Giving Tuesday is their favorite day of the year because, again, it just has this kind of joyous spirit. So really think about making it a fun day, either tape on a big, flip chart or, some kind of a digital thing, a thermometer against your goal, because that'll be great as you're kind of going through the day, not only for your team to feel it, but for you to be able to share that progress on social media. Have lots of food, water, candy, snacks for your team as they're there the whole day. Think about asking your team members to be part of the outreach on Giving Tuesday so they can be themselves all sitting together in a room, and they can be texting, emailing, phoning, folks to just learn more about the campaign, inviting them to participate. And then you can even, some nonprofits with only 2 weeks to go might say, look, there's no way I can put this together in 2 weeks. And we do see nonprofits decide that they're going to kind of turn the whole day on its head and make it a day where instead of doing outreach on Giving Tuesday for new gifts, that we've seen a lot of nonprofits use Giving Tuesday as a day to do a thank-a-thon, where they'll put lots of people together in a room from, staff, board, others who are involved with the organization, and actually call past supporters and say, on this Giving Tuesday, we want to thank you for giving to us, and here are the things we've accomplished this year. And so it's a different take on the day, but it can be a way that a last-minute, participant in Giving Tuesday can do something really powerful and effective and feel like they're accomplishing something that's important, even with just a couple of weeks to go.
Great advice, along with everything else. We are so grateful to you, Jamie, for talking to us. Our guest has been Jamie McDonald, who is working with 92nd Street Y and the Giving Tuesday team. Please check her out and her company, Generosity Incorporated. And we will be sharing this so that folks can listen to this afterwards. Jamie, thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to seeing all the results of Giving Tuesday.
Me too. My pleasure to be with you, Sree. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, and to everyone who's listening, this has been a DIGIMENTORS briefing. If you have any questions, please let us know. And if you have any suggestions for how we can continue to bring you expertise on various topics, please be in touch. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.